Welcome to the Veterans Who Build show. I am super excited for y'all to hear today's guest story. Today we have a Marine Corps veteran turned AEC industry veteran, turned AEC industry tech founder and podcast host. Today's guest shares some very important information for all veterans in the community to hear as it relates to transition period, as it relates to translatable skill sets from military to the built environment. Very important stuff that will impact a lot of people, and that is why I am super excited for y'all to hear it. Thank you to our subscribers, to our listeners. Thank you for listening. A reminder to please subscribe, like, and follow our channels on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Ron Nussbaum. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Welcome everyone to Veterans Who Build show. Today, I am particularly excited for this episode. We got Ron Nussbaum. I'm going to touch on why I'm particularly excited for this episode. First and foremost, please welcome Ron. Ron, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, it is an honor to be here, and I've been looking forward to it as well.
Hell yeah. So, before I give your introduction, and we'll move on from there, I want to point out why I'm super excited about this. I got two reasons. One is I was recently on your podcast, so it's awesome to kind of show the love back, right? And I'll introduce to your podcast in a moment. And two is we both happen to be in the space of technology and construction, and we're both fixing issues that exist there. So love the synergy that we got. And for those reasons, I'm super hyped for this episode.
I love it too, man. It's just a couple of people in the pod here. We're going to talk about some military stuff today. I mean, this is what it's all about, man. This is why we connect. This is why we build these relationships.
Hell yeah. All right. Without further ado, Ron Nussbaum is a dynamic and visionary leader driven by a relentless commitment to innovation and progress. With diverse experiences spanning from Marine Corps, construction, and software, with over 15 years in various leadership, entrepreneur, and professional roles, Ron has solidified his position as a catalyst for change, as the host of Construction Champions podcast, and the founder and CEO of Builder Comms. Ron's mission is to challenge traditional norms and embrace innovation in construction. His unwavering dedication to progress is reshaping mindsets and inspiring others to overcome challenges. I mean, this is exactly what I was highlighting, right? We're changing industry, pushing mindsets to shift the way we build and to build more effectively.
Absolutely, man. I mean, that's what it's all about. No matter what industry you're in, we just happen to be in construction and now software. Like, I feel like we're innovators in the software space now, just because like here we are. We're disrupting an industry, the construction industry. But in order to do that, we have to disrupt the construction software industry as well.
Correct. Absolutely correct, man. We're going to jump in. We'll dive into the business side of things a bit later on. How we'll start is kind of chronological order, right? So tell us about where you're from, where you grew up, and kind of what led you to enlisting, what led you to your service.
Absolutely, man. So I'm originally from Akron, Ohio, born and raised. I used to always say like my name would be on the signs of Akron, and then this kid came along called LeBron James, and his name's on all the signs. But it's not a done deal yet. You never know what might end up happening. But I grew up around business. My parents built the Amway business. I mean, I was homeschooled up until junior high for the reason so I could be on the road with my parents. Like, I remember going to conferences, reading books, listening to books on cassette tapes. growing up. So I was always around that business aspect of things. And, you know, my mom, if you ask her when the decision was made for Ron Nussbaum to become a Marine, it was when this Marine walked into our church wearing his dress blues. He had just graduated boot camp. And my mom says, I don't remember this. I was probably like 5 or 6. I have the picture. I looked at my mom and said, I have to get a picture with him before we leave today. And I went over there and I met him and I got my picture. And my mom would tell you that is the moment that I decided I was going to be a Marine. But you know what? I got out of high school. I had a pretty good gig doing what I was doing. You could say I was kind of a punk ass kid and I was enjoying my life. And I kind of kicked the can down the road and I just kept just doing what I was doing. And when I was, about 22, I really looked in the mirror. Like I was like, what am I doing? And I asked myself the question, like, did I have what it took? Like I had this curiosity of, could I go serve? Could I make it not just through Paris Island, but could I deploy? Could I do this? Like, do I have this in me?
Yeah.
And I wanted to check that box. And here's where it gets a little hairy. Is I go to the Marine Corps recruiter for the first time and we're in there talking. You know, I'm probably 50 pounds overweight at the time. All the whatever. Walk out of there. We get in the car. My dad's like, oh, you know, we can cross that off the list. And I'm like, well, why? He said, because the sergeant major in there, he said, you'll never be a Marine. And I said, well, why not? When I got up to go to the bathroom, he told my dad that because I had a tattoo on my neck, I would never be a Marine. And it was out of their policies. It just wouldn't happen. And, you know, I think that lit a fire under my ass probably more than anything they could else say. So I spent just about the next year getting that tattoo removed and I became a Marine. And I blew
Wow. Yeah.
everybody's mind at the recruiting station. Like they were in disbelief that this was all happening. But I really just needed to check that box. I needed to know if I could go be a Marine. Like I could have went to the Army, the Navy, they were the Air Force. They would have all took me, but there was just something about being a Marine that I really wanted to do. And I checked that box. I went to Paris Island. I stood on the yellow footprints, and I did it.
Hell yeah.
I was able to prove to myself that I had what it took.
Absolutely. Is that something you've heard before in terms of the tattoo?
What do you mean by that?
Meaning, is that like a known no go for enlisting in the Marines?
So I did not know that when I walked into that recruiting office, but it is like the Marines have a very strict tattoo policy when it comes to showing out of your dress blues. They don't,
Interesting.
when you're in your dress uniform, they don't want to be able to see any tattoos. So no hand tattoos, no face, no neck. Like they have this image of what a Marine in their dress uniform should look like, and that's no tattoos. But the funny thing is you get a group of Marines around outside of their dress uniforms.
Right.
It can be debated that we are the most tattooed bunch of any military branch. So that's funny in itself. But I
Yeah,
had
man.
no
That's
idea that that was going to be a
right.
deal.
I mean, that's exactly what I was asking because that was the first time I heard of that dynamic. And in my head, I was thinking like, I mean, pretty common for military folk, right, to have tattoos. So, I mean, that's interesting. That's a funny story, and you know, that just goes to show your kind of determination toward it. Is you know, you broke through those silly obstacles, right, and you end up proving it to yourself. So that's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Congratulations for that, man.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's part of my story. For a long time I didn't tell because I
Mm-hmm.
just thought it was like this kind of this whatever part of it, but it's true. Like
Right.
it's part of who Ron is like
Yeah.
without making that decision, there's a lot of stuff that correlates around
Yeah.
willingness to make that decision.
Yeah, willingness to make it happen. And you know, part of the purpose of the show, right, is to provide stories so that other people can hear it and say, oh, you know what, that is, oh, I didn't think about that. I could do that, right? I could just remove that tattoo and still make it happen, right? So I hope that ends up inspiring someone and doesn't allow for that silly roadblock, right, to prevent a lifetime kind of choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we talked about being a problem solver. Just
Mm-hmm.
understand. I mean, most of us create our
Facts.
own problems. There we go. Like I stepped head first into that one.
Yeah.
I got the tattoo. I created the problem, and
Hell yeah.
I had
Yeah.
to solve it. And that was back then. That was the only way to do it. And I'll tell you, if anybody's ever had a tattoo lasered off, I hope technology has come farther since 2006 because it was the most painful thing I have ever done, still to this day.
Wow, yeah, I actually do think it has advanced. But yeah, noted. I want to also earmark what you just said in terms of problem solving, right? Because later on, after we go through your story of your service, right, we want to touch on translatable skills, and I want to remember that moment because that's an amazing piece to recognize and leverage in our day-to-day lives now as professionals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so with that, I want to continue on with kind of your story, right? You could walk us through, how it was, getting into the Marines itself, and then you could talk about any story, any deployment that comes to mind is a memorable experience for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to Paris Island. I did that. I'm not a Hollywood Marine. I'm a Paris Island Marine. That means something in some circles you run in. A lot of them, it doesn't mean anything. But
Explain that. Explain that.
so the Paris Island is like the original boot camp for Marines,
Hmm.
and like that's where it all started. People have died there becoming Marines. There's this whole,
Hmm.
this whole story and kind of like legacy behind Paris Island, and then out in Camp Pendleton, out in California, is they have another boot camp, and
Hmm.
they call that Hollywood Marines. It's different because
Got
it's
it.
not the
Hmm.
original. So I was on coming from Ohio. I went to South Carolina to Paris Island. I didn't go to California, but
Hmm.
it's an inner branch, an inner
Got it.
Marine Corps thing. Like you can't be any more divisive.
All
But
right.
like here you go, you can split the line. Where did you go to boot camp? The Hollywood Marines would say it's hotter out there because you're dealing with the mountains and everything. But I'll tell you what, in South Carolina, we had the sand fleas and the sand traps, and you sit out there for hours with thousands of bug bites. I don't, it's like naked and afraid training before it was even a thing. Like,
Regardless, it's the OG experience, is what I'm hearing.
yeah, no, absolutely. Like you have this whole they Paris Island has all these stories and lures or like not just myths, like this stuff happened, but over
Hmm.
time the stories have become bigger than life, bigger than everything around it. And if you YouTube like Paris Island boot camp, you're going to think you have to be mentally insane to sign up to go there. So that in itself is just an accomplishment. Like I remember day one
Facts.
being there, some stuff happens, and like I'm standing there on the yellow line, and I'm wondering like, what kind of life decision did I just make? Like,
Oh man, right when you step into it, it's so easy for the mind, right, to go back into the whys, right?
yeah,
So
absolutely.
take us through that experience.
Through boot camp, I got through that. I ended up Paris. I ended not Paris. I ended up at School of Infantry, right here in
Hmm.
North Carolina. Graduated there. I became an 0311, a rifleman. Like that's what I wanted to do. I had a trajectory to what I thought like my Marine Corps career would be, and it starts with being in the infantry and then moving into recon and special forces. I had this, you map all this stuff out in your mind, how you feel, I'm going to be
Yeah.
the most badass dude that's ever walked the planet. Here's the roadmap. Step one, become a United States Marine. Step two, become a rifleman in the United States Marine. So I accomplished all that. End up at Camp
Hell yeah.
Lejeune with
Yeah, carry on. So I said, hell
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Encouraging you.
Yeah. So I ended up Camp Lejeune, 2-2 golf company, and did all workup. Getting ready to deploy to Iraq, I end up meeting my wife. So my bunkmate at Paris Island in School of Infantry, we became really close. Like it's your bunkmate. I mean, I spent
Mm-hmm.
3 months with him at school at Paris Island, and then however long it was at School of Infantry. So but he kept telling me, I have the perfect girl for you. And that ended up being my wife. They were from
Wow.
Michigan. We went up to Michigan on leave. He introduced us. He said, "You two met to be together." Now, if I would introduce you to Eric, like you would be like, "How did this dude ever get this right?" Like it still blows everybody's mind. But he saw something.
Wow.
Now, and
Wow.
we've been married for 15 years. We have a great son together. So I met her pre-deployment, and we
Wow.
deployed to Iraq. And I spent just over 7 months in Iraq, Camp Gannon, right on the Syrian border. Uh, what was it? It would have been 2008.
Mm.
Not like a kinetic environment. Like you think of what your service is going to be like, and like, the Marine Corps, you're a grunt, you're going overseas to deploy, you're like, it's going to be this, and it wasn't. You learned a lot. You learned a lot about communication, believe it or not. Like
Right.
when we were there, because we were on this whole, it's just hearts and minds, and trying to change the perception of what it was like to work with the American troops over there. Did that, checked that box, came back. We got selected to go to Afghanistan.
Mm.
And during the Afghanistan workup, running night ops, I blow my knee out. And
Wow.
that was it. Like at that point in time, the Marine Corps was like, we're done with you. There's no able to fix it to where I could do my job. And like that was it. Me and 3 other people were medically separated because of that one night. Out
Wow.
running night ops out in a swamp that we probably shouldn't have been in. But most of the time in the at least in the Marine Corps, probably across the board in the military, especially in the infantry and special forces and stuff, you're just doing stuff that you probably shouldn't be doing. It's kind of like, that's just how you train, because that's the
Yeah.
environment you operate in. So when you're out running through the swamps, like that's the same kind of environment you're going to run into overseas. Nothing's ever
Right.
perfect, and sometimes shit just happens. And like that was a complete curveball, because like I
Mm.
said, I expected I had at that point in time married my wife Stephanie, and like she had moved to North Carolina. We had the conversation. Like I told her, this is what I'm going to do. Uh, you're gonna have to be along for the ride. Like I want to deploy. I want to do this stuff. Like this is going to be my life. And then boom, it
Wow.
wasn't.
Yeah. I
And
mean, first of all, I want to highlight the fact that you got introduced to your wife right before deploying. It was the right match, and married for, you said 15 years, I think.
yep, 15
Wow.
years.
Congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment, and a kid. So congrats on that front. That's awesome. Back to your story. I mean, what's really interesting is that you train for however much you want to train for. You see this in sports, right? Also, and not to mention for athletes, right? Professional athletes, they have way more advanced, I'll call it, measures right? Pre, whatever the sport is, whatever the event is, the game, and post game. Yet we have these like more extreme expectations on our soldiers, right, on our military to perform way more extreme measures without those kind of pre and post measures that athletes do, and we even see athletes get injured, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's shouldn't be a shock to anyone that happens. It's obviously a shock to yourself personally because that's not what you set out to do. How's the knee now? Is it fixed?
No, it's just it is
Mm,
what it is. It's
yeah.
it's my IT band's all messed up, so my knee don't track right, and
Mm,
they're afraid. What they always tell me. They're afraid they're just going to make it worse if they go in there and start chopping stuff up. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it is what it is when it comes to that. Like, we
Yeah. It
wouldn't
is what
be
it is.
having this conversation right now if it wasn't for that. And like, that's everybody's service is like their own. I think we got to start to realize that is
Hmm.
like you have to own what your service was like, and everybody's was different, and that's
Hmm.
okay. And I think that's where we get in a military mindset where we want it to be all of this, and we want it to align, and we want it to tell a certain story.
Yeah.
But our story is ours, and it's ours to
Yeah.
tell. Like that story I just told for a long time, I was afraid to tell because I felt like it was an embarrassment. Like I got hurt, and then I couldn't go to Afghanistan with my guys, and like then we lost a bunch of guys in Afghanistan, and it was like I just it was hard for me to handle that, and I know like I still think about it. Like I say that, and I think, well, like I wasn't there. I didn't have to go through that that environment and lose those guys and be there, but it was still like I was back home, and there was nothing I
Yeah.
could do. And
Yeah.
but like that's the story that also needs to be told because like
Correct.
that's why like I told you like I am so aligned with what you're doing here and having these conversations because I feel now that I've opened up and had a willingness to tell that
Mm.
story and then like share those emotions that I feel like I've heard it from other guys is like I felt the same way like I got like this was my story and like we feel like we're ashamed to tell that because
Right.
that's just what's kind of ingrained in us, but it's okay
Yeah.
because everybody's
It's okay.
service is different and everybody needs to look at that as being, hey, that is what it was like. God's plan for me
Hmm.
was to not go to Afghanistan. It wasn't to be a lifer. His plan
Hmm.
for me is to be standing here right now having this conversation with you. And we have to accept that no matter how
Hmm.
hard it is, like we have to accept that.
Facts. Yeah. I mean, that's, I certainly know it. I think more and more people are starting to understand exactly as you pointed out. It's not easy to talk about this. It's not easy to break away from that military mindset. And I heard something really interesting recently. I wish I could reference the person, but also a veteran. He was talking about how he dove into some studies after coming to his own realizations. It was some like 12-year or a span of years, I should say, rather, like a 10 to 13-year block where on average they're seeing veterans having the ability to kind of come out of that mindset that they were ingrained to, have, which I think rightfully so at the time of, being in the military, right? You need a certain mindset, but it takes so much time and effort afterwards, again, referencing that like 10 to 12-year mark, which is I mean, funny enough is when this person said it, I realized that to myself. Sounds like you're saying a relatively similar thing as well. So really interesting to note the amount of time and really effort of just self-awareness to be able to just speak and accept truths that is your own path and everyone in their own path. So really big of you to say that, and it doesn't go unnoticed. And to your point of being very pro the purpose of this channel is to say, yeah, more people need to hear this, and the fact that we have veterans that are capable and willing and able and happy to speak their truths and allow for others to recognize that and not feel alone in their truths. So awesome for you to kind of bring light to that scenario. Thank you, man.
No, I mean, thank you for creating the platform for this stuff to be able to happen because, like, somebody hears this, they start to get the wheels turning and they start to
Mm-hmm.
understand some of this stuff. I didn't understand exactly what was going on in my mind
Mm.
until like 8 years out of service, and I'm sitting in like a therapist's office, and they're like,
Yeah.
what you like, you have really, really bad survivor's guilt, like.
Mm.
I'm like, what are you talking about? Like that's nonsense. And they're like, no, like
Yeah.
you don't understand. They're like, and she explained it to me, and she's like, it doesn't matter if you were there. Like, if you were there or not, your guilt is in the fact that you weren't there, that you weren't able to go. And it wasn't until somebody pointed that out to me that I was able to start to process some of that.
Right.
And now, like, and then it took me another 5 years to be willing to even have this conversation
Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
open about it, because then you
Yeah.
start getting around some people and you start hearing, well, this is something that needs to be talked about.
Absolutely. I laugh because, you know, I'm laughing at myself really, right? Because it's just hearing my own truth through you. And it's just such a, you know, you think about it in hindsight, you think about it hearing someone else say it, and it's just, it's comical, right? It's like, well, how the hell does it take that many years to just break out of your own brain? So it's really important to just bring this stuff to light and be light about it, right? Be accepting of,
Mhm.
you know, your own story and the truths that exist, and it's okay, exactly as you put it, just straight up, it's okay. That's it. So let's continue with that story, man. And you know, coming out of service with an injury. Talk to us about your transition, military to civilian.
Yeah, so I mean, transition, I think it's not an elephant in the room. It's where the military sucks. Like, getting out, most of us end up not where we came from, because typically we left for a reason. So we're not going back there. I ended up in Michigan. I never thought I would end up in Michigan. I didn't think I'd be back in Ohio either. I figured I'd be farther south, but we ended up in Michigan, and you don't know anybody. And there's
Right.
no good
Right.
transition thing. And I'm going to say, so like, my buddy that introduced me to me and my wife, we lived 30 minutes from them. And when he got out, he was there, but 30 minutes away. I think we don't, like, we think these relationships that we have are going to be, they're never the same. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
And I've thought about a lot of this in my mind over the years, is like, how do these relationships, like, they're so good, but they just go to the wayside. And like, it don't, you, unless you're living with people, like, it's really, really, really hard to continue these relationships going, especially when we're getting
Yeah.
into, like, I've been out for like 13 years now. But even in that case, like, when I originally got out and I'm 30 minutes from somebody I served with, it was the same thing. Like, you're just alone.
Yeah.
And not alone in the sense of not have, like, I had my wife, I had her family around and stuff. So there was people to try to keep me from being alone. But like, you were talking about that mindset, like, it's, you feel like you don't relate to anything.
Exactly. Yeah. I would highlight that exact last line is you feel alone because you feel you can't relate to anything. And then what's
Mhm.
interesting about the dynamic you brought up, in the sense that you had, you know, a close friend you served with relatively close by, but what ends up happening is that you both are potentially stuck in that headspace. So it doesn't necessarily help that that friend is there, because you're trying to, you know, resolve or understand your own shit, right? So it's there needs to be an additional support system of some capacity to kind of help guide you through it, per se. And what I've been finding, again, and all in this like crazy hindsight element, right? I mean, we're talking again, that time frame of like that 10 plus years, is that in hearing other stories, that's actually been very helpful to recognize, like, oh shit, well, actually, you know what, I'm not the only person in this scenario, I'm not the only person thinking this way.
Well, yeah, I mean, we all have our own lives, and I think
Mm-hmm.
we lose sight of that when we're in the
Yeah.
military. When you're serving active duty, like, you're all living the same life.
Right.
When you
Great
get
point.
out, everybody has their own life. So like,
Mm.
that connection, that bond that was almost forced, becomes really
Yeah.
hard to maintain, because
Facts.
it's no longer 3 o'clock in the morning PT that sucks, creating this bond that's
Yeah.
unbreakable. Like that's
Correct.
people can say whatever they want, but that stuff creates these bonds in this camaraderie and this friendship and brotherhood that you just can't reproduce even
Correct.
with the same people
Mm,
outside of the military. You can't reproduce that because you're not just going to
absolutely.
reproduce the suck for no reason at all. Like it's
Right.
people, you life happens and it just kind of all goes away.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very well said. Yeah. So what happens? What happens next in your story, right? So you're in Michigan now.
Yep.
You're realizing that those not fun, not great headspace, mindset, aloneness. What brings you to the next step?
So I was detailing cars at a Cadillac garage just because it's what I did beforehand, but it wasn't like
Mm,
I had no interest in doing that. And this ad on Craigslist kept coming up for this foreman and training role. And I had no construction experience at the time. And
mm,
I went and apply. And then finally one day I look in the mirror and I go, damn it, Ron, like if you want to go work in construction, go work in construction. You can be a
hell
foreman.
yeah.
Like, why not? And I went and
Mm,
applied for the job. I got the job because I was a Marine. The guy that
hell yeah.
owned the company was an Army guy, loved the Marines. He's like, I've never met a Marine that let me down. And everybody else he was hiring had they were graduating construction management degrees. And so I came in with not necessarily a chip on my shoulder, but with an
Mm,
understanding of like, I need to learn and I need to learn fast.
yeah.
Otherwise, everybody else is going to outpace me. And to be honest, what I found was it was actually a lot easier because the guys
Awesome.
that had the construction management degrees already thought they knew everything. So like I was able to just come in and absorb everything. And I'm a big component. I'm sure we'll touch on it more, but like construction is where veterans should go because
Mm,
there's a structure. It's not easy. That camaraderie is created on job sites, like that is
yeah.
produced. And I think there is not a better transition than going and working in construction. You just
Mm,
like I started as a laborer on a crew, running a jackhammer. Like
yeah.
there's nothing better. Like it gave me an outlet for some of these emotions and stuff I felt, even though I didn't know I needed that outlet. But it gave me
Yeah.
something hard to do every day, and it created some camaraderie that I was missing. And I didn't look back. Like I spent the next 13 years in residential construction and doing everything from running that jackhammer all the way up to running the company and everything in between. And I just dove full in, just like you would a
Yeah.
military
Mhm.
career. I took everything that I had learned growing up and everything I learned while I was in the Marine Corps and was like, we're going to die. This is what we're doing now. And I just dove into it.
Oh yeah. I really love hearing the stories of one, you dove into it. Two, you got hired because of your service. I love to hear that. And then three, what I think is really interesting about the industry of construction and development, right, is it's very much this like sink or swim. And I like that analogy that you brought up with, what goes on day to day on job sites versus kind of like what you have to learn to embrace in the military. So that's an awesome analogy, and I agree with you. It's a great path to the granular detail that you brought up in the sense of get on job sites. You have to collaborate with other people. I mean, that's the only way a project is going to move forward, right? You don't have one person doing everything on a site. That's impossible. So
Mm-hmm.
amazing analogies there, and awesome kind of pointing out translatable skills. Before we get to kind of that part of the discussion, I'm wondering if you have any kind of hindsight advice or lessons learned in that transition period that you just mentioned, right? Finally taking that step forward and starting that career in construction. What could past you have done better if you had the knowledge you had today?
I think I would have investigated different trades as well. Like within construction, like I just absorbed everything I could about what we did and continued to grow in that. And I think what ends up happening is that was a good fit for me, but I think a lot of people get in there, then it's not a fit, and they don't realize that there's
Yeah.
other aspects of construction, like from building houses, demoing houses to custom build. Like there is so many different things that you can do. I think if I could go back, I would do a little investigating on, career trajectory and what that stuff looks like from that perspective. And
That's great advice.
possibly, what can you get licensed and what's attainable in that, to where it's not just a skill set. Like everything I've developed throughout my life is just a developed skill set that I can utilize. It separates me from people. It's not the fact that I have some certificate that says I can do this. I can just do it.
Yeah. That's really awesome advice, career advice for really everyone and anyone, right? Digging into kind of the transition in the headspace of, right, military, civilian to professional. Is there any kind of, and it's fine if you don't have an answer, right? I mean, this isn't like an easy thing to address, right? If you have kind of some hindsight advice in that front as well, that'd be awesome to hear if you do.
What So going from civilian to military?
Oh no, the reverse. Military, civilian to career.
I think the trades. Like I truly do. I mean, I think a lot of people look away from it, still to this day. Even though we know there's this huge gap and there's this huge opportunity in construction, people are still like, whatever. We're just, I'll continue going on doing whatever I hate to do instead of looking, because there's it's one of my missions is to remove. It's one of the reasons I do my podcast, is because to remove this mindset around the construction industry. The best guys I know, the best guys I meet come from the construction industry. I can't quite figure out why, like, we're the only industry, like, that lets this perception of a few, the small percentage around us, disrupt the entire industry. Like, there's bad doctors, there's bad lawyers, there's bad everything, but they don't like completely create a reputation for an entire industry. And we let it happen, not just from a labor force, but also from what our customers think about what we do. We let that little small percentage dictate it all, and it's BS. Like, it is literally the people that built the Word, not just America, but the Word, are people in construction. Those buildings stand.
100% with you.
Yeah, it's not a bunch of dumb construction workers out there slinging mud. Like, that's just not what it is. So don't think that.
I totally agree.
I can't have a career in construction because I don't relate with that.
100% agree. Going back one step to just highlight what you said and kind of double down on it, because you're absolutely right. Where you already kind of addressed this scenario where your recommendation, your advice there was transitioning into construction from military. What allowed you to, or what helped you kind of shift mindset and move forward with life was the camaraderie that you found on job sites, the work itself that you found on job sites, and then to kind of balance that with additional advice, as you mentioned about exploring other trades, right? If you're not happy with what you're doing, explore. And something that came to mind that I was kind of laughing at thinking about that is, you don't really see like HR teams or, I don't know, somebody to say, like performance review in the sense that, is this department good for you, right? Versus maybe you should try this department. So I don't know why I thought of that, but I did. And it was an interesting thought in the sense that like that could potentially solve a lot of things, as if we created some kind of sorting dynamic where it's like, you don't have to be stuck in this trade if you're not happy with it. There's lots of trades to enter. So
Well, you
Yeah,
know
go
why that comes up is because I had a buddy of mine that we did the same thing. And then he was like, I'm going to go run wire. I'm like, why would you want to do that? And then this dude ends up on like they're running wire on hotel builds, and like he
Hmm,
absolutely loves his life. He is like, I just show
good
up
for
and I
him, man.
run wire. Now for me, I was like, I understand like there's not a lot of labor involved in that. I don't know if that would
Yeah.
intrigue me, but I was like, at the time, I'm like 8 years into my career doing what I'm doing. I'm not going to be going and starting to run wire, but I was like, that intrigues me. That is an opportunity that he could pivot from what we were doing. He was
Yeah.
only a couple years into it to then go start running wire. And I was like, well, maybe I should have thought about some of that different when I was coming up
uh,
through the ranks.
I'm gonna do a shout out to electricians, right? I mean, that's a good trait to get into, especially
Mhm.
nowadays. Everything is electricity, so running wire, doing whatever it is that relates to electric work. I mean, that's a good place to get involved with.
But I mean, it's like the military. Like I at School of Infantry, I was stamped my MOS. Same thing for you. Like this is
Yeah,
just who we are and what we do. In all my like, there was no ability to change that. So for everybody out
right,
there, like once you get out, you have some flexibility in that. Just because you start
right,
being an electrician doesn't mean that you can't be like, well, I think I want to be a plumber. Like you have
right.
that flexibility. There's nobody there to tell you that. No, no,
Yeah.
oh. Like for me, I was an 0311. Like you're an 0311. That's just what you are.
It's a really funny thing to need to highlight, but it's very necessary, right? People need to be reminded of that. And by the way, military side, I would suggest also just like a wide sweeping statement. Hey, people in general in the workforce, like you could find other paths if you're not happy. So that's a
Mhm.
great point to highlight, regardless of your background. So let's continue in your career path, right? So you said 13 or so years in the trades, and continue on where you're at now. What was
Yeah.
next?
So what's next is I dealt with escalated customers, and I
Hmm.
didn't want to deal with escalated customers. I don't think anybody does. And I got tired of the phone calls. I got tired of the one-on-ones. And I really dove into like not why do we, but why does the construction industry have such a bad reputation when
Hmm.
it comes to customer service? And
Yeah.
I just spent some time researching that. And what I found out was it was very rarely the guys, and it was almost never the work. The one
Hmm.
thing I could always track it back to was communication. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, okay, so that makes sense. Like communication's a known problem in the construction industry. And one night I was laying in bed and it hit me, and it was just like, if the industry just had software that got everybody on the same page, got the right people talking to the right people,
Yep.
it could change the industry forever.
Yep.
And I got out of bed. I put together a haphazard at best PowerPoint presentation. Like I'm a non-technical tech founder now. So you
Yeah.
can imagine what this PowerPoint presentation looks. The software looks a lot better than what that looked like. And then went down the road of building it. And you know what's
Oh
amazing
yeah.
is like this was 2020.
Yeah.
Software development companies were swamped. They had more work than they knew what to do with. And you know they were
Hmm.
telling me no because I wasn't a software guy. And
Right.
that blew my mind. Once again, like
That.
here's the problem.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so you're gonna
Yeah.
tell me because I'm here talking to you because I'm not the software person, and you're telling me that's the reason why you won't take my money and build one.
It was wild.
So
I Yeah, I want to even before I continue, I want to highlight your discovery path because that is something to highlight, and that's really cool. That you were in industry, you recognized there's some problem happening, right? Generally speaking, unhappy customers, and then you dove in and you dug out what that problem was, which is communications. And I 100% agree with you. I think as you found out, people will agree with you. So that's an awesome discovery path that I wanted to just highlight before we continue. So yeah, now we're in 2020. You're getting rejected from people not accepting your money to build something. How'd you resolve that?
so I just kept grinding it out, man. It was like the tattoo removal. Like you just
Yeah, right.
every time I would go in, that tattoo would be a little bit more gone. So it's like
Yeah.
the same thing is you just keep putting in the
Mm.
reps and eventually you get to that outcome you're
Yeah.
trying to create. I
Oh,
ended
yeah.
up getting accepted into the 10X Incubator, which Grant
Awesome.
Cardone, Jared Yellen put together down in Miami. 26,000 companies applied. I was one of less than
Wow.
100 that got accepted, and I'm one of a
Hell yeah.
handful that actually have brought a product to market. That
Hell yeah.
led me to my introduction to Jared Yellen, who I met through 10X and all of that. He became my
Mm.
partner in this, and from day one, he looked at me and said, Ron, you are the guy because you're the guy
Hell yeah.
that had the problem. And that's who I want to build software with. And that's who I want to build companies with. And
Yeah.
that puts us here to now today where we're a product, we're nationwide, and we're solving the biggest customer complaint, one of the biggest headaches in the construction industry, and that's communication.
Facts. Another huge accomplishment I'm going to call out is that process of getting accepted to that incubator, right? Incubator.
Yep.
That'd be
Yep.
correct. Yeah, getting
Yep.
accepted in that incubator. Now, out of thousands of applicants to actually win out of that incubator, right, be awarded for that next stage, and then actually produce that product, as you said, right. I just wanted to double down on that because that's no easy task. That's like the failure rate on these things are like 90+% easy, if not close to, real close to 100. So that's really the small percentage of success. So congrats, brother. That's really awesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, we're talking about taking a napkin. A PowerPoint. I like to say it's like a nicer napkin, but basically taking an idea and bringing it to market. Like
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
that is
Absolutely.
what, like, if I wasn't a Marine, I probably couldn't be doing what I'm doing right now because, like, it takes a lot of those characteristics, that grit and that determination that you get, the discipline to stay
Hell
the
yeah.
course, to get to where you're headed because you understand
That,
the end
yeah.
outcome and what you want to create.
Absolutely. So you just touched on what I wanted to segue into next, which we have been talking about throughout our conversation. And you, again, just touched on it, which is those translatable skills, right? A lot of times, I've heard a lot of vets and just people, and generally speaking, think, oh, like what the hell could, military career translate into business? And that couldn't be further from the truth. It gives you so much as long as you are able to recognize those skill sets and then translate them into your professional career, right? There's obviously going to be differences, but that doesn't mean that they're not translatable. It doesn't mean that they're not a means of excelling and exceeding because you have that prior experience you just touched on, which is grit and determination. I think those are, or you could combine that into one, is just, determination and showing up and just continuing to do and do. I think that's widespread translatable skill that is ultra important. I know we've touched on a bunch of others. Anything else kind of like top of mind on that translatable skill?
I think when you start talking about that and how you led into that is like we're special because of our service. No matter
Mm-hmm.
what you did, no matter what the job was that you did in the military or your experience, you're special because you chose that route over everything else that you could do. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
the easy route. No matter
Yeah.
how you look at it, like military service isn't the easiest route you can go in life.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes you special. And it
Facts.
makes
Facts.
you, I don't want to be the whatever, but like at the end of the day, you're better than everybody else because of it. That's how I
Yeah.
look at it. That's what we're like. That's what's drilled in your head at boot camp is that you're a
Mm.
Marine. You are the absolute best at
Yeah.
everything. Everybody, but that's how it is for all of us that served. When you go into that career
Yeah.
field, you have an edge up on everybody, and you have to start treating it and looking at it that way
Facts.
and have that chip on your shoulder
Yeah.
instead of looking at it as, oh, yeah, well, I served or I did this. Like, stand up and have some pride in it
Oh
and
yeah.
understand it makes you better than that next candidate because there's
Facts.
stuff that you did that next candidate could never do or would
Mm-hmm.
never be willing to do. And you
Exactly.
should be proud of that. And I think that's what we can, that's the real skill set we take away from our service, but we lose it when we
Yeah.
get out. Like we just
Correct.
say, oh yeah, that was just, yeah, I served. Like it took me 10 years when somebody said, thank you for your service, for me to look at them and just say, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Because like we
Yeah.
don't want, we
Yeah.
want to be like, oh, whatever about it. Like, no, you don't have to thank me. Well, damn it, you do have to thank me. Like, and I
Yeah.
appreciate it when you thank me. And it's not
Oh
in
yeah.
an egotistic or an arrogant way, because now I say, hey, thank you. I really appreciate that you would say that. And I
Yeah.
accept it. I accept that it is okay that I served,
Yeah.
and it's a differentiator, and people should be thankful for that, and I should be thankful that they are thankful, because there's a whole generation before us that people weren't thankful for their service, and they really got
Yeah.
the shit end of it.
Yeah.
So the best thing I can possibly do is probably take that thank you and let them know that I'm thankful they said that.
Very, very well said. No way of putting that in any better words. It's pride for what you did, and having that pride allows you to accept it. Thanks for it, and accept the fact that you can leverage that service for bettering yourself, right? Bettering your career and those around you, even. So nothing to do with ego, nothing to do with I don't know, any negative connotation. Rather, it's straight up pride. You did something special.
Mm-hmm.
Own up to the fact that you did something special, and you deserve to be thankful for it. Right? You deserve to leverage that for bettering what you're doing next. Really well said, man. That's awesome. That's awesome that you said that. All right, next step as we kind of look to close out here. Um, Career wins that just come to mind. I know a few that I could even tell you about, which you told me recently. So let's hear them. Career wins, man.
Yeah, I mean, we're not just making it to market. I mean, I have paying users. We're growing the
Hell yeah.
platform. And the big win was we were just in IBS, the International
Yeah.
Builders Show, top 20 startup. So
Hell
that's
yeah.
a huge, huge honor. I was on Veteran Shark Tank as well, which for all the veterans listening, if you have a business and you're wanting to pitch, go check them out. I mean, it's Comcast puts that stuff on. Like, there's opportunities out there. You just have to go get them. The wins are created by us. Like, we have to create the wins, and the more of us that do it, the more we all win. The entire veteran community wins. Like, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Congrats on that. That's a big accomplishment. That's what I was referring to. It's really exciting to get recognized in that kind of degree, right? I mean, that's really cool. Last but not least, any favorite books you want to recommend, or book? Doesn't have to be multiple.
So, absolutely. So everybody should read The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. I read that when I got out in 2011, and it got my mindset back to like where it needed to be. Second book everybody should read is the book on mental toughness by Andy Frisella. It's about 75 hard, his program for mental toughness. Anybody that is served in the military, this is a program that we wouldn't be standing here having this conversation without, because it got me back in the mindset that I was when I was a Marine, and we tend to lose that often. That program would do it. And then the third book is, if you own a business or want to own a business, is the book Traction by Gino Wickman. It's the best business book that's ever been created. Those are the three books I think everybody should read in their life.
Those are serious recommendations. I recommend them all as well. Ron, thanks so much, man. This was an awesome conversation. I know people are going to take value out of this. Ron, your business podcast and those books will be linked, and I'll link your LinkedIn as well. Will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the show, brother.
Hey man, thank you for having me on. And anytime that I can get together with another veteran and we can have amazing conversations, I look forward to it, man. Thank you.
Hell yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. See you next time.
Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build, If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.